They believed America would break in 6 months. They believed the Americans were soft. On the morning of December 7th, 1941, the sky over Oahu was clear, blue, calm, almost peaceful. Sailors were sleeping in. Some were writing letters home. Others were lining up for breakfast. Coffee steamed in tin cups. Radios played soft music. It felt like any other Sunday in paradise. Then the sky began to hum. At first, it sounded distant, like a swarm of insects, a low vibration rolling across the water. No one panicked. Why would they? Hawaii was supposed to be safe. Thousands of miles from Asia, an American fortress in the Pacific. Then the first bomb hit. The explosion tore through Battleship Row with a sound like the earth splitting open. Metal screamed. Fire leapt into the air. Men were thrown across decks like rag dolls. In seconds, peace turned into chaos. Japanese aircraft roared overhead, suns painted boldly on their wings. Dive bombers dropped low. Torpedo planes skimmed the water. Fighters strafed anything that moved. The attack was precise, coordinated, ruthless. The USS Arizona exploded in a pillar of fire so massive it shook the harbor. Over 1,000 men died in minutes. Oil spilled into the water and burned black and thick. Sailors trapped below deck pounded on steel walls that would never open. And far away in Tokyo, leaders watched the reports come in. They believed they had just knocked America out of the war. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of the attack, knew the gamble. Japan could not win a long war against the United States. American factories dwarfed Japan's industry. American steel, oil, and manpower were overwhelming. But Yamamoto believed in shock. Strike hard, strike fast, break American morale, force negotiation before American power could fully awaken. He promised his superiors 6 months of victories, 6 months to make America quit. Pearl Harbor was meant to crush the American spirit, to show that the Pacific belonged to Japan, to convince Washington that resistance was hopeless. Instead, it did the opposite. Within hours, radio broadcasts crackled across the United States. Families gathered around living room sets. They heard words that would echo for generations, a date which will live in infamy. President Franklin D. Roosevelt did not sound broken. He sounded determined. Across the country, men lined up to enlist. Factories that once built cars prepared to build tanks. Women stepped into industrial jobs. Shipyards began to glow at night. America did not collapse. It ignited. Japan had misread the American character. They believed Americans loved comfort more than sacrifice, that democracy made them weak, that distance from war made them fragile. They were wrong, and the proof would come 6 months later in a stretch of ocean so vast it seemed empty, a place called Midway. After Pearl Harbor, Japan moved quickly. They swept through Southeast Asia. The Philippines fell. Singapore fell. American and Allied forces were pushed back again and again. It looked like the Japanese prediction was coming true, victory after victory. But beneath the surface, American codebreakers were listening. In a cramped office in Hawaii, intelligence officers studied intercepted Japanese messages. Hours turned into days, days into sleepless nights. Slowly, patterns emerged. A target designated AF, a major operation, soon. The Americans suspected AF meant Midway Atoll, a tiny speck of land northwest of Hawaii. Strategic, isolated, critical. To be sure, they sent a false message from Midway reporting a water shortage. Soon after, Japanese communications mentioned that AF was short on water. Confirmation. Japan was coming. Admiral Yamamoto planned a massive strike. 4 aircraft carriers, veteran pilots, the same carriers that had attacked Pearl Harbor, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, the core of Japan's naval air power. The goal was simple:
lure the remaining American carriers into a trap, destroy them, eliminate America's ability to fight in the Pacific, force negotiation. Japanese commanders believed American morale was fragile, that after Pearl Harbor, America would hesitate, that they would not risk what little they had left. They were wrong again. American carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and the hastily repaired Yorktown steamed toward Midway, quietly, carefully. They knew they were outnumbered, they knew the odds, but they also knew something Japan did not. They knew the attack was coming. On June 4, 1942, just after dawn, Japanese planes roared toward Midway. Bombs fell, runways were cratered, buildings burned, but the base was not destroyed, and more importantly, the American carriers were not there. While Japanese aircraft returned to refuel and rearm, confusion spread across the decks. Should they prepare for a second strike on Midway, or arm torpedoes for a naval engagement after reports of American ships nearby? Orders changed, bombs were swapped, torpedoes rolled across hangar decks, fuel lines snaked across steel floors. The carriers became floating fuel tanks packed with explosives, and above the clouds, American planes were searching. The first waves were disastrous. Torpedo squadrons attacked low and slow, without fighter cover. They were slaughtered. Japanese Zero fighters tore them apart. One by one, American planes fell into the sea. Out of entire squadrons, only a handful survived. From the decks of Japanese carriers, it looked like victory again. American attacks seemed desperate, disorganized, futile. But those doomed torpedo pilots did something crucial. They pulled the Japanese fighter cover down to sea level. High above, unseen, American dive bombers were arriving. They had been lost. Fuel was low. Some almost turned back. Then, by chance, one pilot spotted a Japanese destroyer racing through the water, trying to rejoin the fleet. He followed it, and there they were. 4 Japanese carriers, clustered together, decks cluttered with fuel hoses and armed planes. At 10:22 a.m., the sky fell. American dive bombers plunged from 20,000 feet. Sirens wailed as they dropped nearly vertical toward their targets. Japanese crews scrambled. Guns fired wildly, but it was too late. Bombs struck Akagi, then Kaga, then Soryu, then Hiryu. Explosions ripped through hangar decks. Fuel ignited. Ammunition detonated. Firestorms erupted within seconds. Smoke billowed thousands of feet into the sky. 3 carriers were mortally wounded in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. The pride of the Imperial Navy was burning. Hiryu, the 4th carrier, launched counterattacks. American Yorktown was hit. Fires broke out. It seemed Japan might recover, but American planes found Hiryu later that afternoon. They struck hard. By nightfall, all 4 Japanese carriers that had attacked Pearl Harbor were doomed. The balance of power in the Pacific shifted in a single day. Japan had not expected this. They had underestimated American intelligence, underestimated American resolve, underestimated industrial capacity that would soon produce carriers faster than Japan could replace losses. Most critically, they underestimated American response to humiliation. Pearl Harbor was meant to intimidate, to demoralize, to force retreat. Instead, it unified a nation. Midway was more than a naval battle. It was the moment Japan's 6-month window closed. Their best pilots were gone, their experienced deck crews lost, their strategic initiative shattered. And unlike Japan, America could replace what was destroyed. Factories in Detroit converted to tank production. Shipyards in California launched carriers at astonishing speed. Liberty ships rolled off assembly lines in weeks. Training programs expanded. New pilots filled the skies. America did not collapse, it ignited. Japan had misread the American character. They saw Americans as materialistic, soft, divided. They did not see what lay beneath, a nation capable of absorbing a blow and responding with overwhelming force. Midway was the first proof. On the ocean floor near those islands lie the remains of carriers that once dominated the Pacific, rusting steel, silent witnesses to miscalculation. Thousands of men died in that single day, American and Japanese, brave, skilled, many barely out of their teens. History often turns on small moments, a decoded message, a destroyer spotted from the air, a squadron arriving at exactly the right minute. But beneath those moments lies something larger, assumptions. Japan assumed America would endure. They assumed wrong. The war would drag on for 3 more brutal years. Cities would burn, bombers would darken skies, atomic fire would end it all in unimaginable light. But the turning point, the moment the tide reversed, happened in June 1942.